Put your phone down for a second, take a breath, and think about California. Most people think of sunshine when they hear that name. Beaches, palm tree, Hollywood, a place where everything is bright.
And new and alive. But California has another side. A side that the postcards never show. A side that the tour guides never mention. A side that has existed since long before the highways and the hotels and the movie studios were built on top of it. California is one of the oldest inhabited places in North America. For thousands of years before anyone else arrived, people lived here, died here, were buried here. Their stories soaked into this ground so deeply that no amount of concrete and steel has ever fully covered them. And then came the gold rush, the missions, the wars, the displacement, the violence that built this state from the ground up, layer after layer after layer of history that was never fully processed, never fully mourned, never fully put to rest. I'm going to take you to 3 places tonight. 3 real locations in California, places that millions of people pass through every year without knowing what happened inside them, without knowing what is still inside them. These are not campfire stories. These are not invented legends designed to attract tourists. The people I am going to tell you about are real people who walked into these places expecting nothing unusual and walked out different. Stay with me. And if you ever find yourself in California after dark, pay attention to when the air around you suddenly changes. That feeling means something.
Story 1. The first place I want to take you is not a haunted mansion on a hill. It is not an abandoned asylum in the middle of nowhere. It is a hotel. A functioning hotel. One of the most famous hotels in the entire state of California. A place where celebrities have stayed, where presidents have slept, where the most glamorous parties in Los Angeles history have taken place. The Cecil Hotel. 640 South Main Street, downtown Los Angeles. From the outside, the Cecil looks like dozens of other old downtown LA buildings. 14 stories of pale stone and dark windows rising above Main Street. Built in 1927, opened during the height of the Jazz Age, designed to be a grand and glamorous destination. But something went wrong with the Cecil very early. Something that no amount of renovation has ever been able to fix. The first death at the Cecil happened in 1927, the year it opened. By 1930, the hotel had already recorded multiple suicides. By 1940, the number had grown. By 1960, the Cecil Hotel had accumulated a record of death and violence that was virtually unmatched by any other single building in Los Angeles. At least 16 confirmed deaths within its walls over its first 40 years. Possibly more. Records from that era are incomplete. And the management of the Cecil, for most of its history, was not in the habit of keeping careful records of things that might discourage future guests.
Serial killers stayed there. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, lived at the Cecil for months during his killing spree in 1985. He would return to the hotel after his attacks, walk through the lobby, take the elevator to his floor. While the city around him was in absolute terror, he slept in room 14 of the Cecil Hotel. Think about what that means. Think about the energy that gets left behind in a room like that, in a building like that. The staff who worked at the Cecil during those years described something that all of them noticed, but none of them ever officially reported. A feeling in certain parts of the building. Specific parts. The stairwells, the basement laundry room, the hallway on the 4th floor. A feeling that was not fear exactly, but was adjacent to fear. heaviness, a wrongness. Like the air in those spaces had absorbed something and was still holding it.
One former housekeeper who worked at the Cecil for 7 years in the 1990s described what she called the fourth floor problem. She said every single housekeeper who worked that floor, without exception, requested a transfer to a different floor within 6 months. Not because anything specific happened to each of them, but because of a feeling they all described in almost identical terms of being watched. Not by another person, by something that was inside the walls themselves. She said you would be making a bed or cleaning a bathroom, and you would feel it begin. A gradual pressure, like the room was paying attention to you. Like the room was aware of you in a way that rooms should not be aware of anything. She requested her own transfer after 4 months. She did not go back to the fourth floor for the remaining 6.5 years she worked there. In 2013, the Cecil Hotel made international news. A young Canadian woman named Elisa Lamb was staying at the hotel alone. She was 21 years old. She disappeared. For 3 weeks, while guests and staff went about their daily routines, Elisa Lamb was missing. And then, a maintenance worker discovered her body in the rooftop water tank. The tank that supplied water to the entire building. The circumstances of her death have never been fully explained. The autopsy returned a finding of accidental drowning, but left enormous questions unanswered. The rooftop was accessible only through a fire door that should have triggered an alarm. The water tank lid, which weighed over 30 pounds, was found closed from the inside. Security footage from the elevator that night, released by the Los Angeles Police Department, showed Elisa behaving in ways that investigators described as extremely unusual. She pressed multiple Story 2. The second place is older. Much older than any hotel. Much older than the city that eventually grew up around it. It was built in 1784 by Spanish missionaries who had traveled north from Mexico, with the intention of converting the native people of California to Christianity. What they built instead was something that would carry the weight of enormous suffering for the next 240 years. Mission San Juan Capistrano, Orange County, California. Capistrano E. Capistrano. 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 The mission system in California is one of the most contested chapters in the state's history. 21 missions were built along the California coast between 1769 and 1833. They were presented as places of civilization and salvation. What they actually were, in many cases, historical records indicate that several thousand native Californians died within the mission system over its operational years. Many were buried in unmarked graves on the mission grounds, their names unrecorded, their deaths unacknowledged. Their stories absorbed into the same stone walls that tourists photograph every year when they come to see the famous swallows return to Capistrano. The mission is now a museum, a national historic landmark, visited by hundreds of thousands of people each year. Most of them walk through its beautiful gardens and old stone corridors, and feel only the pleasant weight of history. But some do not. The reports from Mission San Juan Capistrano are not recent. They go back as far as the written record of the place itself. Missionaries who worked there in the early 1800s wrote in their journals, in careful, measured language, about sounds they heard at night. Voices coming from the old cemetery on the grounds. Not the sound of wind. Not the sound of animals. Voices, speaking in languages the missionaries did not recognize. Speaking at hours when every living person on the grounds was confirmed to be asleep.
The Soldiers' Chapel, one of the oldest structures still standing at the mission, has been the site of consistent reports for over a century. Visitors who enter alone sometimes refuse to stay. Not because of anything they see, because of what they feel the moment they step through the door. A drop in temperature that has no physical explanation. A sound described by multiple separate visitors who had no knowledge of each other's accounts as breathing. Close. Very close. As if someone is standing directly beside you, breathing slowly and steadily. In a room where you can confirm with your own eyes that no one is there. A docent named Maria, who led tours at the mission for 11 years, told me about a specific afternoon in October of 2015. She was closing up the Soldiers' Chapel at the end of the day. The last tour group had left. She was alone. She was going through her standard closing routine, checking that nothing had been left behind, when she heard it. Footsteps coming from the far corner of the chapel. She turned. The chapel was empty. She checked behind every bench, every column, every alcove. Empty. She went back to the door to leave and heard them again. Directly behind her this time. She did not turn around. She walked out of that chapel and closed the door behind her and stood in the garden for 10 minutes before her hands stopped shaking enough to lock it. She told me that it was not the footsteps that frightened her most. It was the 11 years of small things before that afternoon. 11 years of the air changing in certain parts of the mission. 11 years of tour groups going silent in certain rooms without being asked to. 11 years of children pointing at empty corners and asking their parents who that person was. Children see things at Mission San Juan Capistrano. This is something that multiple staff members have mentioned independently, without prompting. Children on tours will sometimes stop, point at a specific empty space.
Story 3. The third place I want to take you tonight is the one that has stayed with me the longest. Not because it is the most dramatic, but because of how ordinary it looks. Because of how many people walk past it every single day without any idea of what it is, without any idea of what happened there, and without any idea of what is still happening there, according to the people who have been inside it after dark. The Winchester Mystery House, 525 South Winchester Boulevard, San Jose, California. Most people who know about the Winchester House think they know the story. Sarah Winchester, widow of the Winchester rifle fortune, consumed by guilt over the deaths caused by the weapons that made her family rich, told by a medium that she must build continuously or the spirits would come for her. And so she built, for 38 years, without stopping, day and night, 7 days a week. What she built is one of the strangest structures in the United States. 160 rooms, staircases that lead directly into ceilings, doors that open onto blank walls, windows built into the floor, hallways that narrow to a single inch and then dead end. A house designed deliberately to confuse, to disorient, to trap something that Sarah Winchester believed was following her. But here is what most people don't know. The famous story, the medium, the guilt, the continuous construction is largely undocumented. There is no historical record of Sarah Winchester consulting a medium. There is no letter, no diary entry, no contemporary account that confirms she was building to ward off spirits. That story was invented after her death, probably to sell tickets.
What is documented is that Sarah Winchester was a woman who had lost her husband and her only child within years of each other, who retreated to California alone with an enormous fortune, who spent 38 years in a house she never stopped changing, who slept in a different room every night, according to her staff, so that no one would ever know where she was. Think about that. Not for superstitious reasons, not because a medium told her to, but because she was afraid, genuinely, deeply afraid of something she believed was inside that house with her. The staff who worked at the Winchester house during Sarah's lifetime left accounts that were collected by researchers in the decades after her death. They described hearing things at night that they could not explain, hammering from sections of the house where no construction was taking place, voices from rooms that were confirmed to be empty, the sound of a piano being played in a room that contained no piano.
One account, from a groundskeeper who worked at the property from 1910 to 1920, described what happened to him on a night in November of 1917. He was doing his evening rounds of the outer property. He looked up at the house, at the windows, and he counted, something he did every night, a habit. He counted the lit windows to make sure no lamp had been left burning unattended in an empty room. He counted 17 lit windows. He noted this in his log. He went inside. He checked every room. Every single room in that section of the house was dark. Not one lamp was lit, not one candle, not one gas light. He went back outside. He looked up at the windows. All dark. He stood there for a long time. He wrote in his log that night, in very careful handwriting, that he did not know what he had seen, and that he intended to say nothing about it to anyone. The Winchester house is now a tourist attraction. It offers daily tours, Halloween events, flashlight tours after dark. Hundreds of thousands of visitors pass through it every year. And some of them, a small number, leave having experienced something they did not expect. Not on the official tour. Not in the dramatic rooms that the guides point to.
But in the transition spaces, the narrow hallways, the staircases going nowhere, the small rooms built with no clear purpose, the places that Sarah Winchester created not for humans, but for whatever she believed was sharing the house with her. A woman named Diane visited the Winchester house on a private evening tour in 2018. She is an architect. She went because she was interested in the structural anomalies. She told me she is not a person who believes in the supernatural. She told me this 3 times during our conversation. She wanted me to understand who she was before she told me what happened. She was in a small room on the 2nd floor, a room with windows on 3 sides, a room that should have felt open and light, but didn't. She was looking at the construction details of one of the windows, her professional interest fully engaged, when she heard breathing behind her. She described it exactly the way the mission visitors described it.
Close. Slow. Steady. As if someone was standing directly behind her right shoulder. She turned around. The room was empty. She turned back to the window. The breathing resumed. She left the room. She rejoined her tour group. She said nothing to anyone. She drove home. She told her husband. And she told me, years later, that the thing she cannot reconcile is not what she heard. It is the feeling that came with it.
The past stays. It waits.